There is exactly one war in human history that started because a man lost his patience with a very pushy pig and somehow dragged two empires into the world's pettiest staring contest. No assassinated archdukes, no invaded homelands, just one extremely dead potato thief. Diplomats wrote formal letters, admirals moved warships, politicians made speeches, and underneath all of that very serious 19th century mustache twirling was one awkward truth nobody wanted to put in the paperwork. This entire crisis began because someone's dinner kept trespassing. Let's rewind to June 15, 1859, on San Juan Island, a picturesque chunk of land sitting right between what would eventually become Washington State and Canada. At the time, nobody was quite sure who actually owned it. Thanks to some truly impressive vagueness in the 1846 Oregon Treaty, the British thought it was theirs. The Americans thought it was theirs. And sitting right in the middle of this unresolved international mess was an American settler named Lyman Cutlar, trying to grow potatoes, and a British pig belonging to a Hudson's Bay Company employee named Charles Griffin, trying very much to eat those potatoes. Now, this wasn't a one-time thing. Griffin's pig had developed what you might call a habit. It kept breaking into Cutlar's garden, treating his potato patch like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Cutlar had complained. The pig had not listened. So on that June morning, Cutlar did what any reasonable person pushed to their absolute limit by agricultural vandalism would do. He shot the pig. To be clear, this is the only casualty of the entire war we're about to discuss. One pig. That's it. Remember that. Griffin was not thrilled. He demanded $100 in compensation, which in 1859 was roughly the cost of a small house or several non-destructive pigs. Cutlar offered $10, which Griffin declined, possibly while staring at the late pig with justified grief. Griffin then threatened to have Cutlar arrested by British authorities, which Cutlar did not appreciate, seeing as he considered himself to be standing on American soil. This is where things stopped being about the pig and started being about everything else. The local American settlers, suddenly very concerned about British overreach in the form of pig-related law enforcement, asked the U.S. military for protection. In July 1859, Captain George Pickett showed up with troops. Yes, that George Pickett, who would later become famous for a significantly less successful decision involving a charge at Gettysburg. The British, not to be outdone in the escalation department, sent their own reinforcements. By August 10, 1859, the situation had reached what can only be described as completely unhinged levels of military posturing. On one side, 461 Americans with 14 cannons. On the other, 2,140 British troops backed by 5 warships. All of this over an island where a pig had recently been unalived for potato-related crimes. The sheer commitment to the bit is honestly impressive. What makes this even better is that nobody fired a shot. Not one. British Rear Admiral Robert L. Baines, when ordered to engage, essentially said, "Absolutely not. I'm not starting a war over a pig," which suggests he had a firmer grip on proportional response than most people involved. So instead of fighting, everyone just stood there. For years, the Americans set up camp on a windy meadow that was great for artillery placement. The British chose the North Shore, which was much better for resupply, because if you're going to stare at your enemies without fighting them, you might as well be comfortable. In October 1859, U.S. General Winfield Scott, who was 73 years old and had presumably seen enough nonsense in his career, sailed over to negotiate with British Governor James Douglas. They worked out what might be the most reasonable solution to an entirely unreasonable problem: joint occupation. Each side would keep a token force of 100 men on the island. Everyone would calm down. The pig would remain unalived, but at least no humans would join it, and that's how things stayed. For 12 years, 2 countries, hundreds of soldiers, 1 disputed island, and a whole lot of awkward eye contact across the terrain. The troops rotated in and out. They built camps. They presumably got very good at finding ways to fill the time that didn't involve international incidents. The standoff became a kind of long-running performance art piece about stubbornness. Finally, in 1871, both sides agreed to let someone else make the call. They signed the Treaty of Washington and handed the whole mess to German Emperor Wilhelm I for arbitration. Because apparently when you can't solve your own problems, you find a third party with no skin in the game and let them decide. In 1872, Wilhelm took a look at the maps, the arguments, and probably the whole story about the pig, and awarded the San Juan Islands to the United States via the Harrow Strait boundary. The British troops left. The American troops left by 1874, and that was it. 12 years of military occupation, thousands of soldiers deployed, international treaties negotiated, and an emperor brought in to settle things, all because one man had reached his absolute limit with one particular pig's potato obsession. The Pig War remains the only war in history where the casualty list is 1 pig, 0 humans, and the long-term consequences were everyone involved, having to explain this to future generations with a straight face. So if you'd been Lyman Cutlar in June 1859, would you have shot the pig, offered Griffin the $100 and avoided the whole mess, or filed a formal complaint through proper channels that definitely would have solved nothing? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay unhinged.